Okay, one more chapter for today. This is chapter 29. We're going to start now looking forward to the future. The next few chapters are going to start this is the center of the book of Jeremiah, by the way. We skipped ahead and looked at some of the ending material earlier, but the way the book is structured, this material falls right in the center. And that's not an accident. Remember when I talked about the literary structure of Leviticus, way back when we read Leviticus, and I said how it's structured kind of like a triangle, with the top of the triangle being the section about the Day of Atonement, and then the different steps of the triangle going down, relating to each other. At the beginning and at the end, you had sections about the rituals. The first section being about the sacrifices, the second section being about the days, there were special days. In the middle section, you had sections about the priests. The first of those sections being about the ordination of the priests on the first day of their worship system, and the second section being about the rules of the priests and the purity law, the rules of the priests, and then the top sections are about the purity laws on either side of the Day of Atonement. In the middle was the Day of Atonement itself, so it was kind of structured like a triangle, like a pyramid going up and down. And I also said that Leviticus itself is kind of like the middle point of the 5 books of Moses. And so all the 5 books of Moses, from Genesis to Deuteronomy, kind of are structured this way as a pyramid, as a triangle, with Leviticus being in the middle. Genesis and Deuteronomy are the prologue and the epilogue, and then Exodus and Numbers are about their departure from Egypt and their arrival in the land. And then Leviticus is about their worship system, which was the most important thing to them. And I said at the time that if you had asked we today think of Genesis as the most important book, and Genesis 1 as the most important chapter, but if you'd asked Moses what he thought was the most important of all the stuff that he wrote, he'd probably tell you Leviticus was. I think this is the same thing here in Jeremiah. Jeremiah or Baruch or whoever arranged this in its current material put this section in the middle because it forms like the middle, the hinge of the book, at the middle of the smack in the middle, chapters 29 through 33, in our arrangement of 52 chapters, and kind of smack in the middle, and it kind of serves as like the peak of the triangle, much like the Day of Atonement did in the book of Leviticus, the book of Leviticus did in all 5 of the works of Moses. And I don't think that's an accident. We're going to read 30 to 33 tomorrow, or whenever. I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 29 now. But this section in the middle is about hope. Jeremiah has not a lot to say about hope. His message was bad, and he knew it was bad. That's why he didn't want to say it. That's why he struggled so much in the early chapters about delivering this message, because it was not a bad message. He did not have a lot of good news. He had a lot of bad news. We just got done reading about him arguing with the prophet who wanted to preach a false news message of good news. And Jeremiah is saying, I hope you're right, dude. I hope you're correct. I'd like to speak that message, but that's not the message to speak. But now we do have Jeremiah's good news. Here in the middle of Jeremiah, we do have the good news that Jeremiah spoke. He did have some good news. And we begin it here in chapter 29. This is the text of the letter that the prophet Jeremiah sent from Jerusalem to the surviving elders among the exiles. So this is to Babylon. He is sending a letter to Babylon, to the people living there who were taken there, and to the priests, the prophets, and all the other people Nebuchadnezzar had carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. This was after King Jeconiah and the queen mother, the court officials, and the leaders of Judah and Jerusalem, the craftsmen and the artisans, had gone into exile from Jerusalem. Hang on a second. So we read about that. We read in chapter 24 about this vision of the basket of figs. Remember in chapter 24, he saw these visions, one basket full of good figs and one basket full of bad figs. And God told him that he viewed the people, God, viewed the people who had been taken away from the city already as the good figs, the good batch, the people that he can work with, and eventually, not yet, they're not ready yet, but eventually mold them into something he can use to redeem his people with. And the people left in the city with the bad figs, they're just going to have to be thrown out. So these are the good figs. These are the people that are the better class of society. They're not really ready to be redeemed just yet. They're still in a bad state of mind right now, but eventually, someday, they will be ready. He, Jeremiah, entrusted the letter to Elasah, son of Shaphan. So there's that Shaphan guy again. And to Gemariah, son of Hilkiah. Shaphan and Hilkiah had been Josiah's allies. So these probably are good guys here, sons of good guys, whom Zedekiah, king of Judah, sent to Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. It said. So they're there to talk to the Nebuchadnezzar for some reason. Some sort of diplomatic mission on behalf of King Zedekiah. But while they're there, they're also delivering a message to the Jewish captives who are already in Babylon. And here's the content of that letter. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Also, so basically, settle yourselves. Make yourselves at home. You're going to be here for a while. Make yourselves at home. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it. That'd be a hard thing to do. That would be a hard thing to do. I struggle with that. I'm not really in exile. I'm not in a physical exile, but it is hard to pray for those who you don't want to pray for. Those who are oppressing you and are mistreating you and taunting you. It's like, oh, it's hard to pray for them. Hard to do that. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. So they had false prophets there too. We've talked about some who were in the city. We talked about some who were speaking to the nations around them. And they have some in Babylon speaking to the exiles there too. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, he already said this in chapter 25. He says to people in Jerusalem. Now he's saying to people in exile. The counter basically started when Nebuchadnezzar became king. So we're already a few years into this 70 years. But he's telling the people this now in exile. He already had mentioned the people who are still in Jerusalem. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. It's going to take him 70 years to be ready to do that. They have a lot of purification and cleansing to go through. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity or restore your fortunes. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have banished you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. You may say, the Lord has raised up prophets for us in Babylon, but this is what the Lord says about the king who sits on David's throne, and all the people who remain in this city, the countrymen who did not go with you into exile. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I will send the sword, famine, and plague against them, and I will make them like the poor figs that are so bad they cannot be eaten. Now, Jeremiah had known about this imagery of the figs, because he had the vision. He's probably told it to the people of the city already, but this is the first the exiles in Babylon are hearing about it. I will pursue them with the sword. By the way, there's another little indication there that Zedekiah isn't really seen as a proper king. They refer to him here as the king who sits on the throne, which is kind of an odd way to talk about someone, unless you consider him someone who really shouldn't be sitting on that throne. It's kind of I don't really know for sure, but you put that together with what Hananiah the prophet said in the previous chapter, and it does not appear as though the people of that time viewed Zedekiah as the proper king, as the real king. I will pursue them with the sword, famine, and plague, and will make them abhorrent to all the kingdoms of the earth. and an object of cursing and horror, of scorn and reproach among all the nations where I drive them. For they have not listened to my words, declares the Lord, words that I sent to them again and again, rising early and sending by my servants the prophets. And you exiles have not listened either, declares the Lord. Now someday they will. They're here in this city because they're someday going to be ready to hear. The people who are left behind we'll read about them later on. They're not ever going to be ready to hear. Therefore, hear the word of the Lord, all you exiles whom I have sent away from Jerusalem to Babylon. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says about Ahab, son of Kolaiah, and Zedekiah, son of Maaseiah, who are prophesying lies to you in my name. So we have two of the names specifically here. I don't know, there may have been others. There may have just been these two, I don't know. But all these false prophets are not all generic. They're not all just shadowy, unnamed figures in the background. Two of them are specifically called out here by name. Ahab and Zedekiah. I will hand them over to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he will put them to death before your very eyes. Because of them, all the exiles from Judah who are in Babylon will use this curse. The Lord treat you like Zedekiah and Ahab, whom the king of Babylon burned in the fire. We'll read about Nebuchadnezzar wanting to burn people in furnaces later on. Apparently this was his way of executing people. I don't know what reason Nebuchadnezzar would have ultimately to execute these guys. If they were guilty of some kind of offense against him, or else their crimes against the Jews, the exiles, became known to him. I'm not clear. We don't read about this being fulfilled. We don't actually have a narrative account of the fulfillment of this prophecy, but something's going to happen to bring Nebuchadnezzar's attention to these two, and he's going to put them to death. And from that point onward, they're going to be used as a curse for the people still living in Babylon. For they have done outrageous things in Israel. They have committed adultery with their neighbors' wives, and in my name have spoken lies, which I did not tell them to do. I know it, and I am a witness to it, declares the Lord. Maybe the adultery is the reason why they're put to death. Maybe that was the legal reason. Nebuchadnezzar is the king. He doesn't really need a reason. He's going to throw people into the furnace in Daniel chapter 3 later on, and we're going to see him do that. So he doesn't really need a reason. But I don't know what his reasoning would have been when he did it. Anyway, so another specific message to an individual person here. Tell Shemaiah the Neelamite, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. You sent letters in here. So he's in exile. Shemaiah the Neelamite guy is in exile. So these messengers are going to Babylon. They're going to find this guy and say this to him. You sent letters in your own name to all the people in Jerusalem. So he is sending letters, or has already sent letters, back to Jerusalem from his position as an exile in Babylon. You sent letters in your own name to all the people in Jerusalem, to Zephaniah, son of Maaseiah the priest, and to all the other priests. You said to Zephaniah, the Lord has appointed you. This is not the Zephaniah, by the way, who has a book of the Bible named after him. That was a guy who was a member of the royal family connected to Hezekiah. So he cannot be a priest. So they're not the same dude. You said to Zephaniah, the Lord has appointed you priest in place of Jehoiada to be in charge of the house of the Lord. So Jehoiada, I guess, was the guy who was carried off into Babylon, I guess. You should put any madman who acts like a prophet into the stocks and neck irons. He's talking about Jeremiah here. Just so you know, he's not just talking about any generic madman. He's talking about Jeremiah. That's the guy he wants him to do this to. So why have you not reprimanded Jeremiah from Anathoth, who poses as a prophet among you? He has sent this message to us in Babylon. It will be a long time. Therefore build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce. So this apparently is after the messengers came back from their meeting with Babylon and gave this message, and we're getting the account of the response to that message from a guy who was in Babylon, who sent a letter back to Jerusalem, and now we're sending a letter back to him somehow. Kind of confusing, but that's how ancient correspondence went. You didn't have cell phones, you didn't have email, you didn't have FaceTime, you didn't have Zoom. You had to send letters back and forth and wait months for them to get to their destination. Zephaniah the priest, however, read the letter to Jeremiah the prophet, so he did not put Jeremiah in the stocks. Then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. Send this message to all the exiles. This is what the Lord says about Shemaiah the Neelamite. Because Shemaiah has prophesied to you, even though I did not send him, and has led you to believe in lies. This is a third lying prophet. Now, we had two already mentioned. There's a third one here as well. This is what the Lord says. I will surely punish Shemaiah the Neelamite and his descendants. He will have no one left among his people, nor will he see the good things I will do for my people, declares the Lord, because he has preached rebellion against me. Those good things are 60 plus years in the future at this point. Most of the people at the time are not going to see those good things. Most of them are going to be dead by then. But Shemaiah is not even going to have descendants left at that point. His sin is so bad that God is going to cut off his descendants as well. So neither he nor his descendants will see the good things. It's a different mindset than today, okay? Like these people, when we talk about God having good news for them in Jeremiah 29, some of them may have still been alive. Daniel, for example, was taken into captivity early. He was in the first wave in 605 BC when Nebuchadnezzar first became king, first came upon the land. And he was when the first wave, he was even there before Ezekiel, before Jeconiah. And he will actually live all the way. He was a young man, probably in his mid-teens at the time, and he will live all through those 70 years. Okay, the 70-year countdown, I think, begins basically when Nebuchadnezzar becomes king. We don't really know exactly the exact moment the countdown starts. Even if it's a literal 70-year countdown, it's kind of uncertain. But I think it's probably about 606 to 536 BC. It's roughly the time frame of the 70 years. And Daniel was alive for all of it. We're going to read about that in the book of Daniel. He was a young man taken into captivity at the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And he was there through the end of Nebuchadnezzar, through the end of Babylon after him, and into the reign of the Persians who ruled the country after Babylon fell. And he was there even when the people of his time even were getting ready to go back to the land. I don't think he went back to the land. He would have been in his 80s probably at that point, maybe even older. But I don't think he made the trip back. But he was there when they went back. He was there when they were getting ready to go back. So some of them would have. Some of them would have lived all the way down to the return from exile. Most of them would not have. I'm 40 years old. I'm not going to, Queen Elizabeth, Queen of England, Queen of Britain, died about a month ago. She had reigned for 70 years. The second longest reigning monarch in the world history, for whom we have absolute dates, reigning sovereign monarch, for whom we have absolute dates, longest reigning female monarch, and she reigned for 70 years. You have to go back to the 50s to go before her. You have to be at least 75 years old to remember a time before Elizabeth was queen. I'm not going to live to see another 70-year-long reign. If it ever happens again, I'm not going to see it. The guy on the throne now is 73. He'll come and go in a few years. The guy after him is my age. He's four. Actually, I think he's a year younger than me. Even if William becomes king tomorrow, he's going to have to live to be 110. He's going to reign 70 years, which isn't going to happen. And even if he does, I'm not going to be there to see it. 70 years is a long time. Most of these people are not going to be there at the end of that 70-year period. But their children will, or their grandchildren will. But not Shemaiah. Shemaiah's not going to even have that. In their day and time, when you make these sorts of promises, or you think about these sorts of things being fulfilled in the time of your descendants, that, in our day and time, that's kind of like an empty promise, because well, you're not going to see it. And they're not. Okay, they're not. But they had a much more heritage and inheritance emphasis than we have today. So even the idea that your sons are going to come back to the land 2 generations after you, that meant something. It would have been more impactful to them than it would probably be to us today, because we just don't think that way. But if you lose your sons, if you don't have any descendants, then you're cut off, and again, I said so many times before, that's their version of hell. There's nothing worse than being left without descendants, and that's basically what God has said will happen to this guy, because he was speaking against Jeremiah and speaking lies in the name of God. Okay, so next time we're going to read about this good news. We got the first little bit of good news in this letter to the exiles about them coming back 70 years from now. or there being a 70-year countdown, and they're going to come back at the end of that time. It's actually already begun. The 70-year countdown has already begun. So they're going to come back at the end of it. And now in the next few chapters, we're going to get some really good news about this new covenant that God's going to make with the people. And that will be Jeremiah's contribution. Not only is that going to be Jeremiah's good news of the book, in a book that's otherwise full of bad news, almost exclusively, except for this section. This is also going to be Jeremiah's contribution to the vision of this kingdom that the prophets are painting for us. Okay, all these prophets, Isaiah did it, Micah's done it. All these prophets are painting an image of this kingdom that's going to come. Jeremiah doesn't focus on that a lot. He focuses mainly on the here and now, and the doom and gloom that is surrounding him, and that the people are going to have to go through in their own experiences. And that's the vast majority of his book. He doesn't talk a lot about the future kingdom, doesn't talk a lot about anything but doom and gloom. But he does have a little bit to say, and his major contribution to it will be focusing on the covenant that's going to govern this kingdom, which we haven't really read about before. That's going to be a new little wrinkle. He's going to introduce a new thought to this vision that Isaiah didn't mention, or Micah, or any of the previous prophets. So we're going to read about that next time.